Hi there and welcome to the channel on this, the most splendid of occasions, for it is, this evening, my 1000 subscribers Q&A. That's right. And first of all, I have to say a huge thank you to everyone who sent questions. You shall not remain nameless. I'm going to credit you on the way through. So without further ado, let's begin. And we have here a question, well, 3 questions rather, from Tripp, a regular commenter on the channel. They write, "Congrats on the well-deserved milestone." Why, thank you. "Do you have any favourite works of Chinese literature?" Well, the answer here is yes. Although I must admit I'm not particularly well versed in Chinese literature, I've read 2 books which have come in extremely useful, more useful than you would ever have imagined in graduate school, and I'll explain why that is as I go through them. And the first of them is this, the book of, well, I guess if you're going to say it in an anglicised way, you just say something like Chuanzu, something like this, but it's actually more like Chuanzu, right? So I've been practicing. And this is philosophy, and it's a key text in Taoist thinking. And the reason reading this is so useful is that studying this book, the writings of this person, is still a key part of the education system in China and in Taiwan. So when I'm in graduate class, sometimes I'll wish to illustrate a point. I know that if I cite a little incident from the writings of this man, then my classmates will be able for sure to know what I'm referring to. And for that reason, I've also read the Analects of Confucius, which come in just as useful for the same reasons. I should mention that if you think, I don't really know anything about this particular writer, they did pen the line that is often quoted of waking from a dream of being a butterfly and then reflecting, hold on a second, am I a man dreaming of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being a man? I heartily recommend this. The stories here are very beautiful and, as you'd expect, full of wisdom. Okay, let's have the next question from Tripp. So Tripp's second question is, what was the major culture shock in moving to Taiwan? And there are 2 rather obvious answers here. Firstly, the language. I simply didn't know a word of Chinese, and 15 years or so on, I still am very bad at Chinese, I'm sorry to say. And the second thing was the food. The food was just so different. There were many things I didn't even recognize as food. But as time has gone by, I've grown very fond of numerous Taiwan dishes. I've actually asked my wife to prepare some to share with you, and I have them here, so I'm just going to pick them up and talk you through them. So firstly, we have this, and it is fish, and it is red snapper belly, and it's just delicious. I also had to learn to eat with chopsticks moving to Taiwan, and no one had the patience to teach me because, as you can see, the disappointed man is left-handed, so pretty much taught myself. My wife says I'm quite good now, so you'll be able to gauge my proficiency as I lift up a little bit of my red snapper belly to show you. So there it is. It doesn't have any bones, it just has some oil and the meat, and it's really, really delicious. I have broken some off here, so I'm just going to have a little taste. Oops. We're ready. Here we go. Superb. Okay, so that is red snapper belly. I have 2 more dishes down here. Let me get them. So on this plate we have over here, this is called luobogao, and it is rice and radish. And what they do is they grind the rice and then they add radish to it. Then they steam that, and then at home you fry it, okay? And it's also really delicious. Let me grab a piece of this, okay? Just wonderful, about the same consistency as potato. Yeah, delicious. And then lastly, we have these, and this is beef roll. The outside, the roll part, is a pancake, and then you just put some beef and spring onion inside and roll it up. And there you have it. I'm not going to eat this because this is particularly chewy, but these are also delicious. So there are 3 dishes from Taiwan. Very happy to share them with you. And after that, I need a drink. So I'll show you one of my favorite drinks. It's here in my glass. I just bought this from the local tea shop on the way home. And it is lemon and kumquat. Kumquat. I think we say kumquat, don't we? And this is so refreshing, no matter how tired you are. You drink some of this and it's just zing, like this. And I don't drink coffee, so this is a kind of healthier alternative. I'll just have a sip of this and then we'll move on to Tripp's final question. Wonderful. Tripp's final question is what is underrated about Taiwan, and I'm going to go for safety. Now, I know that sounds strange given there was a huge earthquake here last week and there are the geopolitical tensions with China, but if we set them to one side and consider Taiwan solely as a society, it's one of the safest places on the planet to live. And before I moved here, I never would have guessed just how beneficial it is to live in such a safe environment. You're able to walk around day or night alone in any part of the city and not feel concerned for your safety. Also, people are really respectful of one another. I live in a densely populated city, yet everyone seems to have mastered how to treat one another with respect. The public restrooms are immaculate. The public transport is spotless. And so that is the one thing before I came here that I never would have guessed. And it really does contribute to my welfare each day. It's just wonderful not having to be on your guard all the time. It really helps you to relax. Okay, let's move on. The next question is from Painbow, a very early subscriber to the channel who's followed me on my journey all the way to today. And they write, what are your 10 favorite books? Now, I did pick out some that I kind of regard as cheating, but I'll show them to you anyway. The first one is because it's an anthology, so that's not really going to count as a favorite book, is it? But I'd like to once again emphasize that these Norton anthologies are wasted on students. This one on the Middle Ages, I have to say, is one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's just crammed with masterpieces, with amazing notes, and I really got so much out of reading this last year. So that could be a favorite book, but it's not really honoring, I believe, the spirit in which Painbow asked their question. Then similarly, this is a collection of books in effect, isn't it? Because it's William Blake's The Complete Illuminated Books. So again, I think this would be kind of cheating, but if you can get hold of a copy of this and you're into Blake, I sincerely recommend that you do so. Published by Thames and Hudson. I got this brand new copy for £1, which I always remember every time I pick it up. I've been to look at many of these illuminated books at the Tate while living in England so many times just to behold them in person. But having this is just wonderful. And then finally, this is the heaviest book I own, and it's this Gardner's Art Through the Ages 14th edition, and I have it on the desk, and when I'm just feeling at a low ebb or rather uninspired, I would just open it up on any page really and flick through it, and it's simply magnificent. The quality of the images is such that if I put my glasses on and just stare, you know, you can pick out all of the details just as if you're in the gallery. So those are, in effect, 3 of my favourite books. But now, as I say, I'll go through kind of more like novels and journals, this kind of thing. So we'll begin with Robinson Crusoe, definitely one of my 10 favourite books. It could even be my favourite. Wonderful, wonderful book. I'll never, ever tire of reading that. Next we have the book that the channel is named after, The Journal of a Disappointed Man by W.M.P. Barbellion, the pseudonym of Bruce Cummings. This is just superb. He died at a very early age of multiple sclerosis. He was a prodigious natural scientist. He had people corresponding with him when he was only 10 or 11 years old. He was just an exceptionally gifted man, and his dream was to work at the British Museum, which he duly achieved, but it was rather bittersweet. He didn't enjoy his duties there. He became an authority on cockroaches, I believe, and used to go out to infestations of bed bugs, and he also knew that his days were numbered. So dear, I am inspired every time I read some of this. It's just written in fabulous prose. He lived in the last quarter of the 20th century and died sort of in the early part of that. Introduction by H.G. Wells. Next, Denton Welsh in Youth is Pleasure. I've talked about it plenty of times. Got a very Henry Tuke type picture there on the cover. And this is my favourite of his novels, very slim, but it's just magnificently written, very clearly written, but the images are just beautiful. This is one of the best books about being a child. It's set on a child's holiday, and there are some moments of sexual awakening, as you might expect from an adolescent, but it's just beautifully told. Everything Denton Welsh wrote is just worth reading, and I wrote my thesis about his final posthumous work, A Voice Through a Cloud. So if you're not aware of Denton Welsh, I recommend that. Then Rousseau's Confessions. Rousseau, who laid the groundwork for Romanticism, one of my favourite movements. Now, I know Rousseau has been frequently condemned since his time, well, during his time too, actually. He's always been a very divisive figure, but I just found his autobiography absolutely magnificent. I was reading the first few pages last night as I was preparing to answer these questions, and oh my goodness, I could just read it again. I think I've read it cover to cover at least 5 times, and I've really savoured it on each occasion. So if you're not familiar with this book, well worth checking out. Rousseau lived in the 18th century and just moved around all over Europe. Really fascinating life, fascinating person. Next, one of my absolute favourite books, and perhaps my favourite writer, period, is Thomas de Quincey, a master of style, absolutely magnificent. I can remember many of the phrases from this. They just ring out when I'm walking around. Infinite cavalcades, you know, and he's having these architectural visions. This is just superb, but there are many other works by de Quincey that are equally good. I like his On Murder, considered as one of the fine arts, and The English Mail Coach, and Suspiria, and De Profundis. Yes, so many great works. It's not really about celebrating drug use. It's so much more. De Quincey anticipated Freud in many respects. This is one of the best explorations you'll ever read of the mind. Yeah, and Dickens was also a huge fan of de Quincey. The Lost Girl in the City motif is really borrowed from de Quincey. He was also the first flaneur. So if you like your Baudelaire, those kind of French flaneurs, de Quincey did it first. And he was also the first troll. You know, sometimes referred to as the first troll for his vicious attacks on his fellow literary men, particularly in his later days, Wordsworth. Okay, then Max Beerbohm with his Zuleika Dobson. This is superb. It's the high point of dandified fiction. I don't think this is too well known. Published in the 1920s and set in Oxford. Yeah, there's a follow-up set in Cambridge. This is just magnificent. I don't want to break it to you what it's about, but Zuleika Dobson comes to Oxford, which at that time was male only. The colleges and all of these very repressed students all go finally insane because of how beautiful and magnetic she is, and an aristocrat falls completely for her, and much of the novel is the sort of on-off nature of their romance. The language is just perfect. It's just absolutely superb, and it's full of kind of supernatural goings on too. It's just brilliantly done. Max Beerbohm is better known for his caricatures, and also he mixed in that 1890s circle with Oscar Wilde. I remember reading a quote from Max Beerbohm where he said, "It was an age of great talk around the tables, but no one could match Oscar Wilde in that era." Yeah, so he mixed with Oscar Wilde, but that is superb. If you've never heard of it, then G.K. Chesterton, The Man Who Was Thursday. You won't read a more exciting short novel than this. If you enjoyed Viva Vendetta, if you're into kind of anarchism, this is just a magnificent book. And it's so deeply weird, has its own kind of dream logic, which unfolds and it becomes just infinitely strange as you reach the end, and it's impossible to know quite what to make of it. But it isn't a head scratcher. It's just more that it's just opened up so many possibilities with its conclusion that you're just like sat there with your mind blown, like one of those 60s hippies listening to Sgt. Pepper's for the first time. This is absolutely magnificent. And his other novel, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, is just as good. So I could have chosen either of these, but I chose this one because it may be slightly better known. Yeah, dig this one out and read it, please. And then what, we have 3 more, don't we? This could be considered cheating, I suppose. You decide. Maybe you'll forgive me. But it is a collection, and it is the Sherlock Holmes stories. No one really into English literature can be without at least some kind of passing acquaintance with these stories, along with the works of Shakespeare. That would be my argument. I've read these cover to cover a bunch of times, and they're absolutely superb. Actually, I've marked my favourite stories on the contents page, so if I pull them out, I can maybe make a few recommendations. I do remember off the top of my head that Silver Blaze was my favourite. The Adventure of the Empty House was also really good. What's this? The Adventure of the Red Circle. You see, I've got my little, I do this with some of these collections. They're so big that you'll never remember what you enjoyed unless you just mark them up. The Adventure of the Devil's Foot. The Musgrave Ritual is also really good. Oh, it seems I only really like 2 from that one. This was volume 1. Oh yeah, here we got a few more. Oh, The Adventure of the Beryl Coconut. I'd have to refresh my memory of that one. Oh yeah, Silver Blaze. The Yellow Face. That is excellent. It's very unusual. It has a kind of racial dimension to it. And then we have Musgrave Ritual. Yeah, The Naval Treaty, The Final Problem, and The Adventure of the Empty House. I also remember The Adventure of the Bruce Partington Plans being very good. So, Sherlock Holmes. Next, biography. The Quest for Corvo. This is superb. This is a cult book. Some people may be well aware of this. It's called An Experiment in Biography. And what it does is basically the research process of writing the biography, of visiting different places, forms a part of the biography. So it doesn't hide that from you. So you begin with someone kind of dropping a sheaf of papers into A.J.A. Simon's hand and say, "Have you ever read this?" And he opens it up, and it's by Corvo, Baron Corvo, the pen name of Frederick Rolfe, a very, very idiosyncratic man who began his life in England and ended it under a cloud in Venice. And so it's just the way he's trying to penetrate the mystery of Corvo. It's really brilliantly written. A lot of people that write professional biography will cite this. It's a biographer's biography. So The Quest for Corvo, it's also outrageously funny. Also, so I strongly recommend that. And finally, a book I've mentioned countless times, but it is one of my favourites, and it is Jenny, Our Lady of the Flowers. This copy is literally falling to pieces. Yes, it is falling. You see the bindings all come unpicked because it's all absolutely like covered in notes because I just love this book so much. I can pick it up at any point and begin reading, and it will stimulate me. It's just so richly imagined. Jenny kind of had dreams of like becoming a kind of Proust-like figure, so he set about writing, and it does parody like the Madeleine moment from Remembrance of Things Past, Remembrance of Times Past. So yes, Jenny, this is my favourite novel of his. Some of the others, he gets wrapped up in his own mythology a little too much, so that if you haven't read all of the novels that precede that particular volume, then you'll struggle really to understand what's going on. He develops this kind of shorthand, but no, here he's setting it all out for you. So this is the place to start. So Painbow, those are 10 of my favourite books. Hope you enjoyed that rather thorough answer to your question. Let's move on. So this is from Errata, a regular commenter on the channel. Congratulations on 1K. Here's my question. If you could spend the day with an author, living or dead, who would you choose and why? Now, presumably, if I choose a dead author, I'm not expected to simply sit next to a pile of bones for 24 hours. They must be animated somehow, either a spirit or a ghost, or perhaps I'm being furnished with a time machine. Anyway, my choice would be Oscar Wilde, without a doubt, my absolute literary hero. And I remember when I lived in Dublin, I used to frequently go and sit by the actual size sculpture. It's quite beautiful, of Oscar Wilde reclining on a stone. And I used to fantasize about him coming back to life and having a discussion with me. So this question would allow me to realize that fantasy. Okay, let's move on. So this is from HarveyDenton, and it's really 3 questions. First of them, what are your thoughts about the idea that BookTube has made modern readers more superficially focused when it comes to literature, i.e. the interest in book covers, aesthetics, etc.? So here I don't really have a strong opinion. It seems to me there are many things in the culture that point people towards being more superficial, so trying to pin part of the blame on BookTube seems a bit of a stretch, and I really don't mind. If people want to pick out a book on the basis of its cover, who am I to judge them? Secondly, would you say you're disappointed or apathetic about people making choices on this basis? I would say, as you may have grasped from what I've just said, that I'm ambivalent rather than any of those 2 adjectives. It simply doesn't matter to me what choices other people are making. One of the reasons I'm so interested in the past, in literature from bygone eras, is you're not subject to a kind of noise or chorus around you as you're opining on these works, as you're engaging with them, as you're sharing them. It's not like when I make a video about, I don't know, a H.G. Wells novel, that I know that that month there'll be 50 more videos made by booktubers all saying different things about that same novel. That's what it means to not follow trends. That's partly why I'm not really interested in contemporary stuff. It's so trend driven that it's not really possible to form any kind of objective view on the quality of works as they emerge. I find some parts of this really frustrating, like books being canonized on publication. You know, this idea of the instant classic, that's an oxymoron. All the fuss about a particular writer as the next big thing. I can live without all of this noise, really. And the publishing industry has become so sophisticated. Its marketing departments are so skilled at kind of generating this constant hype that I find it really off-putting. And so that is one of the reasons that I detach myself from it completely and just bury myself in the past. You might think I'm just running away from the fight by having an attitude like that. Judge me if you wish, but that's my stance. And so I don't really have a strong opinion here. And now a more simple question. What is your favorite BookTube channel? Well, on the 500 Q&A, we had this question and I chose my own channel. And here, 500 subscribers later, I'm going to double down and say the channel of a disappointed man remains my favorite BookTube channel, and I remain my favorite booktuber. I can't really see how you can be motivated to produce content if you're not going to place yourself at the top of your own little tree, if you're not going to give yourself a kind of seat in the pantheon of great booktubers. What would it mean to just think that what I'm doing is second rate? No, you have to believe 1000% in what you're doing. And if my answer strikes you as the height of vanity, well then, again, you're free to judge me, but you can't condemn me for not having given an honest answer. Okay, next. So this is from JamieGreene, and it's really 4 questions. They write, congratulations on 1K. Now on to the questions. 1, what is your favorite editions for classics? Penguin Classics, Oxford Vintage, etc. Okay, so my answer here would be Penguin Classics, but with this qualification, it must be these ones, published in the 80s. These have the best introductions. Thankfully, they change the design and it's easy to distinguish them. So when I see these ones, I'm not as interested as these. Okay, next question. Who's an author that at one point, whether from your work or early school days, that you had to read yet absolutely loathed to? I've mentioned her a few times on the channel. It's Mary Ann Evans, George Eliot. I simply can't get into her writing. As soon as I open up Silas Marner or Middlemarch, I just feel like a schoolchild sat on a hard bench in a cold classroom, listening to an indefatigable teacher with a monotonous voice, reading a never-ending story, crammed with moral lessons that I'm supposed to absorb. I just do not enjoy reading George Eliot. And finally, are you very much into movies, music, or are you more of a literature purist? I would not say I'm a purist. However, I haven't watched a movie for 20 years or more, and I don't read any contemporary fiction. So I guess I am something of a purist when it comes to books, but I do like the occasional movie, particularly those directed by Louis Buñuel, his surrealist films, and also John Carpenter's dystopias like They Live and The Thing. They've got Escape from New York, and neorealism. I like The Battle of Algiers, directed by Pontecorvo, 1966, and The Colour of Pomegranates by Parajanov is also a personal favourite. I think I had one more to share. Who was that? Oh yes, Shank Tatty, Playtime. So that's some of my favourite movies. And then music I'm still really into, but I just listen to what I grew up with. So it's alternative stuff. It's Joy Division, Swans, Loop, and Talking Heads. Yeah, stuff like that, Sonic Youth. Okay, oh sorry, I did miss a question here. Who is the best contemporary author out there now working? What a difficult question to answer when I've already said I don't really engage with contemporary writing. Well, of fiction anyway. I do read a lot of non-fiction and journalism that's being produced at present. It's a golden age for those, I believe. Okay, so I do have one book by a contemporary author who I do rate, and it's William T. Vollmann's Rising Up and Rising Down. And I would declare him the best contemporary author on the following basis. I just cannot imagine someone having more literary talent than this guy. The first chapter of this, when he's walking around some catacombs, is absolutely amazing. So prove me wrong if you like, and just nominate someone in the comments who you think is better than Vollmann, and I'd be more than happy to check them out. Okay, let's move on. So this is from Anna, one of the channel's most loyal supporters, and there really are so many questions. She's even added a few more this morning. So they write, "Hello Jason, 1,000 and more congratulations for your 1,000+ subscribers. So happy for you and the channel. Here are a few questions. Are there any books you've decided to never read, books you have censored, or do you try to stay open-minded when it comes to books, whatever their contents or authors?" Well, my answer here is no, nothing is off limits. I will read pretty much anything with regards to the background of the author and the contents. However, of course, there are kind of entire zones of literature that I'm not really going to bother with, like fantasy writing and a lot of contemporary stuff, or those ones that you only see in the airport with the big silver or gold letters on the cover. I don't know who writes them. Is it Tom Clancy or Robert Ludlum or Barbara Taylor Bradford? All of that stuff, of course, but that's just for reasons of taste, not because I object to what is in those books particularly. It's just that it's not for me. I did try reading one of them. Who was it? It was something like W.E.B. Griffin. It was some kind of spy thriller, and what I really did enjoy was that every time someone was using a gun, you got this long description of it, so you knew exactly what kind of gun it was. It was done in that way, and if someone got into a car, then you got like the size of the engine and every bit of the detail there. I do think that kind of writing is entertaining. It's for dads, isn't it, with their dreams of being a secret agent. I put it down, but there were certain conventions that were quite amusing. I also like that thing in spy thrillers where a chapter starts in a different city each time, but it always has to be one of those exotic, cities. It has to be somewhere that's a center of power, It's always Addis Ababa or Paris or New York. It's never just somewhere like Doncaster in England or just some village somewhere. Okay, so yeah, there's an appeal there, I guess, but no, I'm totally actually against censorship of written material of any kind whatsoever for any reason whatsoever. So it would be rather false of me to practice that on a personal level. Okay, next question is what would the ideal world of the disappointing man look like? And there are a whole series of categories here. As far as society, I'm going to leave society to the end, but landscapes, okay, it would be subtropical. It would be jungle. Architecture, I would go with Incan, Aztec, or ancient Egyptian. Art, we'd have the full range of arts, except I guess live art, performance art with my avant-garde background would be banned. I think that is totally for charlatans. So Marina Abramovich would not be welcome in my ideal society. Sports, there would be no golf, but all of the other sports would be accepted. Food, French or Italian or Spanish food, yeah, it would be a Mediterranean diet. I would favour books, yeah, books of every description. Anything goes. Would be any authors that I would not permit in my paradise? No, they could all be there. Clothing, everyone who was there, we'll come on to this in a second, who would be there, would dress as a Regency dandy. The weather would be like that in Guatemala or Hawaii, about 200 days a year when it's around 84F, 27 or so degrees C, zero humidity. That is basically perfect climactic conditions for the disappointed man. Technologies, there'd be no military technology more advanced than the bow and arrow, or maybe not even the bow and arrow, okay, than the stone axe or something like this, so that men, it's basically men, isn't it, would not be able to charge around killing one another. Watching the news this morning and seeing all these missile strikes happening in the Middle East, it'd be much better if those guys were going at it with stone axes or slingshots. That's what I would favour. Any other things you dream to put in your ideal world? No, but I should come on to this last one, social interactions. Yes, there would only be myself there. That would be the twist. There is a J.G. Ballard short story, The Ultimate City, which has this scenario where there's a completely empty, functioning city and just a couple of individuals residing there, who of course go to war with one another. With an entire city and only a couple of them, they can't live in peace. That really is humankind in a nutshell. So just like that, I would have an entire city that functioned, but just be myself. My ideal society is just the disappointed man. The next question, regarding your PhD, how is your research going? Oh, how are your classes going too? Would you mind updating us? My research is not moving forward very quickly, in truth, although I am accumulating the necessary materials. I've used the donations to the channel, the buy me a coffee aspect of doing this, to fund quite a few purchases from Amazon that will really help, and I have read some of those actually. There's one in the other room I could run and get, but I'll just leave it. But it was Corey Taylor, Dying, a memoir, which was actually a very unsuccessful text in my view, but sometimes it's those ones which are precisely the most valuable for writing about them, because you just pick out what is lacking or its flaws, and it enables you to really refine your arguments. So for research purposes, bad books really do come in very useful. I've got another one out there, it's called something like Field Notes on Dementia. This one is really well written. I believe it's by a professor. So yes, my research is inching forward, I would say. And then the classes are quite good. I'm taking 2 this semester with 2 of my favorite professors at National Taiwan University and National Taiwan Normal University. One of them is from Spain, but studied in the US. The other is from the US. And it's going very well. We're reading lots of spiritual and psychedelic literature in the one class, and the other one is the Gothic. So we read Castle of Otranto, Vathek, and Frankenstein, Dracula last week. I'm reading M.R. James today, A Ghost Story, number 13. And M.R. James is absolutely one of my favorite writers of ghost stories. So yes, I'm enjoying both of my classes. Thank you. I'm getting close to having the necessary credits that I need so that I won't have to take any more classes. I won't have to sit there as a student. I'll just be able to focus on producing my research and getting ready to defend it. So all of that will be happening in the coming 18 months or 2 years or so. There's no real rush or imperative to finish. So there we go. Next, looking back on your journey on BookTube, what are the most positive things that come to your mind? Well, firstly, just the pleasure that you can derive from accumulating so much content. When I look at the 156 or 7 videos I've made and think of how much time went into them, and they very much are a lasting record of my interests. And so I can watch them and kind of refresh my memory about stuff that I've covered. And I am secretly proud of myself for having, in my view, generated so much fresh content all by myself here in my book room. So it's very satisfying on that level. And then there are the commenters and the comments. I get a thrill every time I get the little red YouTube Studio notification to tell me someone has commented on one of my videos, and I pretty much drop everything to go and see what they've said. And as anyone who follows the channel will know, I reply to every comment, and I don't reply with one of those stock answers, you know, just click the button, it'll say, oh, thank you, and put a heart there. No, I will sit down and write a proper response, and if the comment is deep enough, I will mull my response for a certain period of time and then write my thoughts there. So I really do enjoy that. And then there is the Discord server too, which I check into daily. I just have it running in the background while I'm at work, and anyone who comments there, I will get involved, or sometimes I just lurk. But I also enjoy having created that resource. So yeah, there are many things to obtain pleasure from being a booktuber, and yeah, that's just a few of them. Next, your rewarding experiences as a teacher. Oh, Anna, I would say I'm pretty much doomed to be a teacher by the kind of person I am. Just have a large stock of knowledge, and I'm not too bad at communicating it to others, but I would not seriously recommend this profession to others if I had been made differently. I'm pretty sure I never would have got into this. There are occasionally a few rewarding experiences teaching children. I find the teaching at the university way more satisfying, way more intellectually rewarding. But what I do like about the younger ones is sometimes you'll get like the little note and a gift, and they're just kind of saying thank you to you, and it comes from the heart. I guess mum or dad help to clean up the writing, but you do feel, you know, a thrill. And so I'll read this one to you. Oh, I don't have my glasses, but it won't matter. This was from a wonderful student called Cindy, who was so shy and so quiet, so delicate. Yeah, she was wonderful. And it says, to the cutest teacher, that's me, Jason, I'm glad to be your student. I still remember the first time. It's like a poem, isn't it? I still remember the first time I was worried about listening to the English class. Before, I'd never had this kind of lesson before, but the teacher's humanity took away my fears. You are like the Kid King around us. Thank you for your earnest instruction. And it came with this little cup that the earthquake thankfully spared, which I keep on my table. So there are a few things like this that will make me feel kind of soft and gooey about what I do, but there are also the daily assaults on your dignity that you have to put up with when you teach children. So, you know, you work it out for yourself. The cost-benefit analysis there. Another question from Anna. What writers have you discovered via the channel and Discord? Well, it's mostly been through Discord, and Anna here is one of the people who has pointed me towards particularly French writers I was unaware of. So there was this Joe Bousquet she recommended to me, and also I can't remember if I found it through Anna, but the Paul Léotin. Where is his book? Oh yes, this was really good. Journal of a Man of Letters, and he was a contemporary of Gide, André Gide, so he appears quite frequently in this. And yeah, it's sort of one generation after the Goncourt brothers have left the scene, have passed away. So I guess it's like in the early part of the 20th century, in the 20s. So I think Anna had something to do with my enthusiasm here, and also she's advised me occasionally on aspects of the French language. So yeah, the channel's led to some good discoveries. Do I have any more questions from Anna? I believe that is all of them. Let me read you the end of her message. Thanks a lot for all the great content you have produced and will be producing. Okay, let's move on. So this is from David Hall, a regular commenter on the channel. They write, congrats. Are there any authors you could not connect with or strongly disliked for a time, but that you've grown to appreciate? What about authors or works that you held in high regard, but have lost their appeal? My tastes have changed over time in both directions. Great questions, David. And on the first of these, I have a very surprising and dramatic answer, and that would be that 90% of the books you see here, I did not connect with in my early life. In my teens and 20s, I read works that sat within the counterculture. So it was Burroughs and Ballard and lots of science fiction, some philosophy and some existential writing. Then when I went to university, to art school, I studied the products of the historical avant-garde. So we had writers like Calvino and Raymond Queneau and Gertrude Stein. This is a superb autobiography of Alice B. Toklas. And it wasn't until I was approaching the age of 40 that I began to read classics of English literature. I don't think I read a Dickens novel until I arrived here in Taiwan. This may surprise people who follow the channel, but actually perhaps it could give people hope. You can get into many new writers in a fairly short space of time. I know 10 years to me doesn't seem like much time. It seems like the blink of an eye, but there we have it. All of the stuff I'm into now is pretty much new to me, relatively speaking. And then on the second question, are there any authors who you no longer hold in such high regard? Yes, there is, and it is William S. Burroughs. For many years, decades actually, he was my favourite writer, bar none. But now when I go back and revisit his works, I'm struck by the fact that many of them are pretty much gibberish or not of particularly great quality, and it's hard, it's painful to have that experience. However, there are still some of his works I would recommend. So The Wild Boys is great, and I love this one set in the Mayan civilization. Of course, I lived in Guatemala, so this really speaks to me. I love the cover. Our Pookie's here, and the Burroughs file is essential. You know, this is one of the best Burroughs texts. And finally, his debut, Junkie. This is one of the most authoritative, statements on addiction, and this really holds up. It's written in a hard-boiled style, and yes, this is superb, but many of his other works disappoint now. And also, I've so thoroughly imbibed his thinking that I no longer really need to refer to the primary texts themselves. Okay, next. So this is from Herbert Blair, and they write, is there objectivity in art? What a profound question. I'm not quite sure how to interpret it. Firstly, I'm going to narrow art down to literature. And then if you want a movement that is striving for objectivity, you're going to look at something like realism. And there aren't that many, in truth, great realist writers, because it's such a demanding project to try and depict the entire social structure. And also realist novels require an enormous amount of information to be marshaled to produce the desired effect. So there's very few writers actually with the tools to do the job. In the English tradition, I will pick out George Gissing as my favorite, and this book, New Grub Street, is particularly good. Yes, it's exceedingly dense, and at the start I would say the first 150 pages, it doesn't really feel like it's moving, but it just accumulates in power as you go on, and by the end I was absolutely gripped by this. It really is a great novel, and I I recommend this to anyone who's not checked out Gissing, and his other novels are equally good. He was a great writer. Here, Born in Exile. This one really speaks to me. The central character, Godwin Peak, is very similar to myself in many respects. I love the picture on the cover. I don't dress like Godwin Peak, as you can gather from that image. And his final novel, Will Warburton, A Romance, is really great. It picks up on an idea in New Grub Street. It's a kind of in-joke, and it's about a man who loses everything, a gentleman, and then resorts to being a greengrocer, and finds over time that it's not the worst fate in the world to be a tradesman, and he falls in love at the end. It's a beautiful story, and it has a very subtle kind of humour. George Gissing's humour is actually underrated because it's understated. So that's what I'd say regarding Objectivity. And then at the other end, we have, of course, Surrealism, which looks to go beyond reality. And there, I pick out a work like this by J.G. Ballard, The Unlimited Dream Company, because it also depicts London, as Gissing does in New Grub Street, but this just reimagines every aspect of it. So I like both approaches. They complement one another, but I would say generally that realist writing is so difficult to do effectively that there just aren't that many examples to get into. Okay, great question. Next. So this is from I Like Some Books Too, and it's really 4 questions. Firstly, do you read or enjoy comics, manga at all? And the answer here is I have just a couple of classic ones, and it's just something I don't know much about. There is a French bookstore in Taipei City, and they have many of those French comics, bande dessinée, so I may buy some when it's my birthday in a few months. But the ones I have are by Alan Moore, and firstly I have this very nice edition of his Watchmen, and I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I also really enjoyed the movie adaptation. And secondly, his V for Vendetta, which again was a great read. This came actually with the free mask, which I do wear occasionally at the school, like a bonfire night or Halloween. Okay, the next question. What's the worst classical author, I guess classic author, you've read? I would say, I've already mentioned George Eliot elsewhere in this video. So another one that I'm not particularly enamored of is Virginia Woolf. I know she has many devotees, but some of her novels I just find impossible to become interested in. Jacob's Room, absolutely appalling. It was just so dull, so sorry. And the third question, what's the thing you're most disappointed with in modern literature? I don't really engage with modern literature. Don't people watch the channel and see that it's not really about contemporary stuff? It's all about celebrating the past. So I don't really have anything to say on that subject. Finally, what's your ideal sandwich? I'll go for brown bread with some chicken and avocado on it. Okay, next. So this is from Braden Douglas, and they write, what, in your opinion, is your least and most favourite era of literature to read from, and why? So let's begin with my favourite period. That would be Romanticism. There are just so many major artists to enjoy. The big poets like Byron, Shelley, Keats, Wordsworth, Blake, Jane Austen's novels, Sir Walter Scott, Thomas de Quincey, First Wave Gothic, Anne Radcliffe, Horace Walpole, Matthew Lewis. Then in Germany you have Goethe, Schiller, von Kleist. In France, Prosper Mérimée, and in the US, Edgar Allan Poe. So Romanticism. Also, I'd mention the 1890s, the Yellow Book, Oscar Wilde, Aubrey Beardsley, and the decade after it, the Edwardian period, Conan Doyle, Stevenson, Haggard. Yes, that period too. And my least favourite, I could say contemporary literature again, but sound like a broken record. So I'll choose the period of Beowulf. Yeah, these Norse sagas don't really do a lot for me. Just cold people wandering around killing monsters and thinking about going to join their ancestors. It's too martial for my taste. Okay, let's move on. So this is from Cullen Wiss. I'm not sure if that's how I say the handle. Actually, he's a member of the Discord server. I believe he's a teacher in Belgium, a great guy. And his questions are, why do you stay away from Nobel Prize literature? The answer is very simple. I'm not interested in what the cultural elites are concerning themselves with, what they want to place upon a pedestal. I feel no affinity for these people. I'm from rebel stock, from the Irish peasantry, to be precise. And these writers that attend and sit in the presence of all these European royals to receive their gong, I think it's so degrading. So I just steer clear of all of that. Which country has produced the most consistent stream of interesting literature in your opinion? Without a doubt, the region that punches above its weight is Latin America. So many amazing writers. And finally here, what's the worst book you've ever read? Not books like Twilight, I've never read Twilight, but actual literature. So here I'll choose a Nobel laureate to back up my point, and it's Peter Handke's The Afternoon of a Writer. It's very short, but it's an abomination. It's so contrived, and the writer figure, who I guess is acting as a stand-in for Handke himself with his kind of gnomic, mysterious half-life, wandering through the city alone, having deep thoughts. It's just so pretentious. It's just pseudo-intellectual tosh. I challenge anyone here to go and read this book and then come back and argue with me that it's not one of the worst things you've ever read. And there you go. They gave him the greatest prize in world literature. All right. I think we are done with everyone's questions. Thank you for watching this 1K Q&A. I guess when we get to 2000 I'll do another one, but for now there's your lot, there's your fill of all the life and opinions of the disappointing man, and all that remains is for me to bid you farewell in the customary fashion. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.